Hello, sisters. Okay, so this will be a reading and commentary on Eating Fire My Life as a Lesbian Avenger by Kelly Cogswell. So, the whole thing with reading books on my channel was supposed to be to make kind of obscure stuff accessible. This is not obscure at all. It's won like awards. It's very mainstream, like accessible to buy. And it's pretty contemporary. It's from 2014. But it's about lesbian history, and a ton of women have told me you should read this book. It's like a grassroots how to this book. So I was like, fuck, that seems something important to put on the internet, maybe. So we can start doing grassroots stuff. I actually have like an idea. Well, I always have like 10 billion ideas. So we'll see if it actually happens. I have an idea to make like a series of videos which are like how to set up like a secure online feminist group, how to vet women to do in-person meetups. Like I would love to do like a series of videos which is like how to do stuff to get grassroots shit going, you know? And even to interview women who've done other stuff like that. I don't know, whatever. But this is like the first step in that direction. All right. Where all of you? Where are you? It was like 20 of you a second ago. Now this stream you're all gone. Okay. So I thought it was like just 4 chapters. Hello, Tostones. Oh, and media. I need to make a series of videos about like how to vet journalists and like how to access journalists and like how to write a press release and stuff. I just need to make a lot of videos that are like telling women how to get shit done, you know what I mean? Okay, so I thought it was 4 chapters. It is not. It has 4 parts and each part has chapters. Thank God, cuz I was like I'm going to have to say like I read from page 1 to page 30 today instead of that, but okay. So, also it says to Anna at the beginning. And like just speculation, I'm imagining that Anna was like her girlfriend when she was in the Lesbian Avengers, who was also a Lesbian Avenger. You know what I mean? Okay, but who knows? We're gonna learn. I'm sure. I'm sure she's mentioned in the book. Maybe it's her current wife. Who knows? Um, Part 1: Activist Honeymoon. Unscrew the locks from the doors. Unscrew the doors themselves from their jams. Walt Whitman. I have to say the fact that the quote, but the fact that she's quoting a man. I don't think she's a separatist. I'm going to try not to hold her to the same standard. Okay. Chapter 1. In 1992, when the Lesbian Avengers started, I was living in a loft on Avenue B with my ex-girlfriend Amy and her roommate Renee. Renz, I guess. Who would pick up the closeted fags and have noisy, slurpy sex. I shouldn't complain. He'd agreed to let me live there for cheap, the broke poet with some weird disease that had me crying out with feverish dreams, disrupting his post-coital sleep. Drag queens had been there first, and it took days for me and Amy to clean the eyeshadow ground into the bathroom grout. Above us was our tequila-soaked landlady, whose overflowing jacuzzi sometimes came through our ceiling. Below us were a pit bull, a large iguana, and 2 tattooed musician dykes. And on the ground floor, the 2 casa recording studio and rehearsal space that gave all our lives the same irregular 4/4 beat. Every Saturday night, the pioneering Korean deli owners across the street would shout, "Call the police! Call the police!" And every Saturday night, one of us would call 911 and wait for the blue and white to turn up, sirens blaring, cops laconic as a crackhead ran down the street with the till. Every block had 2 or 3 gaps where buildings had burned to the ground. In between, in grimly graffitied buildings, lived poor Latino families, sprinkled with an assortment of artists and queers. Once Renz organized a brunch, and I ended up making pancakes for some elderly British neighbor in a broad-brimmed hat and purple cloak that he introduced as Quinton Crisp. A couple blocks north, in the rapidly gentrifying East Village, was Tompkins Square Park with its dealers and drummers. In the summer, it hosted the likes of Wigstock, Lady Bunny, and every wannabe beatnik in the world. At all times, it held the homeless, along with a full complement of squirrels, other rodents, and dogs. My friend Catherine, lived up the northeastern edge in a basement apartment. I'd visit at night, scurrying past the rats when she didn't have the late shift waitressing or a gig with her band. I saw her once at CBGB's, thin and energetic on her traps, but she also played guitar too and wrote her own stuff. She'd give me a couple puffs of her weed, and we'd talk all about our failures with girls, and then sometimes mess around with her instruments. For a while, we called ourselves the Sextets, randomly picking poems from a volume of Anne Sexton, with me wailing the lyrics and thunking away on the bass, and Catherine playing guitar. We never tried to get any shows, and only had one witness to the whole time, but it made us happy. We weren't afraid, yet, of squandering our lives and dying poor, alone in the crappiest hospitals reserved for the uninsured. I get the sense that this is in New York City. I don't know why I thought it was in Guelph, Ontario. Yeah, okay. Maybe she ends up in Guelph, Ontario at some point later on. Just because I know a lesbian who was a lesbian Avenger who lived there who was like, yeah, we went to school together or something, or we lived together or something. So I thought, anyway, I don't know. We'll see. Also, she's using the word queer. Already, I'm done with this book. But it was recommended to me by some radical lesbians, so I'm just gonna ignore the word queer as much as possible. Okay. I think we met at an action for ILGO, the Irish Lesbian and Gay Organization, though she's about as Irish as I am, meaning hardly at all. She went because of an Irish ex. I went because of Mary Honan, an Irish girl I met when I was temping at Philip Morris. She had leopard print glasses and a handbag big as a kitchen sink. Mary lived in Brooklyn then, with Anne McGuire, her girlfriend, and for a couple of years I followed them around like a barely housebroken pup. They were the first lesbian couple I ever knew. Cool, smart, pretty, and composed, even under a fire of beer cans and garbage that we caught along with Mayor Dinkins when we walked for the first and only time out as out Irish queers in the St. Patrick's Day parade. I adored them both. Tried to be them, really. The way I'd tried to be my oldest sister, trailing around in her t-shirts and that dropped to my knees. I bummed cigarettes, borrowed clothes and accents, learned to warm a teapot and drink tea, listened to their stories of girls on the rampage in Dublin and heroes in Belfast, slept often in their spare room, slept with Marie a few times until Anne found out. Like typical dyke draw, obviously. Like, it's like the second page. Okay. I only understood the betrayal when I saw it on her face. I don't know why she didn't hold it against me. I guess she saw how young I was in many ways and decided to treat me kindly. And I'm a sucker for kindness, even if it ends. But it hadn't yet, not then. One night when I was hanging out with them at their new place on Fifth Street, they announced they were going to dinner at some Cuban playwright's house because she wanted to start a lesbian action group. I tried to invite myself along, but they weren't having it. Quote, we don't really know her. That would be rude. End quote. But what's meant to be is meant to be, and I still ended up in the Lesbian Avengers, and I had my dinner with that playwright, Anna Simo. Okay, Anna. So that's who the book is dedicated to. The founder, I guess, of the Lesbian Avengers. Okay. Chapter 2. If I mentioned Catherine first, it's because I'm trying to remember what those days were like and what I was like, actually, when the East Village really did seem like a small town and my dyke friends just lived around the corner, dragging their politics and art into the street. I remembered neighborhood fixtures, like a homeless black man down Fourth who ranted about honkies and the man and would spit at anything that moved. There was a crackhead white woman, too, on St. Mark's Place, who would set up a card table with tattered anti-porn pamphlets and a faded blow-up of that Playboy illustration that had a woman going through a meat grinder. There were also the ambulatory skeletons of people dying from AIDS, and I ventured into a couple of ACT UP meetings on Cooper Union. But there were so many people, so many men. I also tried a Women's Action Coalition meeting, but WAC was stuffed with those good-smelling Soho types who had never applied for Medicaid. Closer to me than the young black woman who went around... Sorry, closer to me was that young black woman who went around the park with Band-Aid colored leggings smeared in the crotch with an enormous bloody stain. Mostly, I traced the neighborhood one concrete block at a time with my notebook and pen, looking for a moment or two of grace. Like that time in the middle of the night, I saw this man playing Bach on his guitar in front of the Most Holy Redeemer Church, all around crumpled brown bags and pools of piss. He played with such concentrated joy, even the drunks halted in their reeling dance back home. That grace is gone now, gone for me anyway. Like Keith Haring's funny fucking figures, the anguished cries of David Bornowicz and other and the tower in the community garden at 6th and B that rose up bit by bit until it reached 2 stories, all scrap lumber, broken dolls, and old shoes strung on. It got too high, aspired too much without permits, and probably was a menace. Amy moved to Boston long ago. Anna and I went to France for a while. When we came back in 2010, Catherine was one of the few old timers who I'd kept up with, though she splits time with San Francisco. Not long ago, we ate big greasy burgers at Paul's, which still has the gigantic plastic hamburger outside. Afterwards, we went back to her place near the park and listened to a little music. Though not the Indigo Girls or Sinead O'Connor, I talked a lot and art and politics, the big scar on her chest and the tiny ones on my belly. When I walked home to ours this time, through the silent streets, I tried to erase that chic restaurant, all the fancy apartment buildings, and the cute little shops, and feel what lay beyond. Probably it happened like this. Amy came home from her job at the advertising agency doing Photoshop and Illustrator, changed into shorts, and we walked together to the community center over on West 12th, passing some artistic grunge and Latino flash to the bourgeois respectability of the West Village, though the center hadn't achieved that yet. It was crumbling and dirty, but very alive. Since coming to New York a couple years before, I'd only been there twice. Once for a meeting of the Irish Lesbian and Gay Association, ILGO, where I felt totally out of place despite my name. Again, for a thing put on by queer Puerto Ricans when I got all choked up at their fight for independence from the United States. They showed me the image of Pedro Albizu Campos' body broken by jail and torture, and pictures of Lolita Lebron, who had fired a few rounds into the House Representatives and then rotted in the U.S. pen for 25 years before she was amnestized out. The meetings were listed in front of the desk. I blanched a little at the name. Avengers was great, but lesbian seemed a label of no return. Not that others hadn't stuck it to me. There was that summer after my sophomore year where I was working in Yellowstone with a skinny, insecure quote unquote friend, and some of the afternoons the other girls would stand outside the dorm room howling, "Lezzies, lezzies, lezzies," like a pack of wolves. In Cincinnati once, a carload of guys with scrawny white necks threw beer bottles at me, yelling, "Fucking dyke." I knew I mostly liked girls, but I'd hedged my bets when I'd written to my mother to come out and named myself bi. She fired off a disgusted response. Writing prostitute was more like it if my changing addresses were anything to go by. She didn't want to hear from me, quote, "until you're the girl God wants you to be," end quote. Fuck religion. Um, okay, so for some reason I thought it was like implied that this woman they were going to meet was like one of the founders, or she was a founder. I don't know. So I guess that woman wasn't like the founder or something, because they're both like going to this meeting together, right? I don't know, whatever. Okay, let's keep going. Yet there I was in the Gay and Lesbian Center, going to a meeting of the Lesbian Avengers. Can you imagine if the 519 in Toronto, if the, what's it called? It's like Michael's house or like McConnell's house or something in Seattle. If any of, or like, I don't know, or the Gay and Lesbian Center in New York. Can you imagine if any of these places would now host a meeting specifically for lesbians, specifically for lesbian activists? Can you imagine if I was like, yo, 519, I want to have like a lesbian, like feminist meetup. Can we do that here? Can we book a room? Okay, I need to close the door. Momo just opened it. One sec. Momo. Probably going to open it again, aren't you? Momo. Momo. Come see the people. Say hello. Okay. Look. It's yours. Okay. Sorry. Okie dokie. It was on the same upper it was on some upper floor, and the air got hotter every couple of steps as we crept up the decrepit wooden staircase covered with posters. The funky bathrooms that intentionally mixed the signals for girls and boys were also covered with flyers, photos, postcards, and graffiti. Queer history on the hoof. We picked our folding metal we picked our folding metal chairs, and I tried to look around without meeting anybody's eyes. I was there mostly because I was still trailing Anne and Marie and didn't want to miss anything. Chubby, brainy Amy probably would have gone anyway. She'd already been involved in feminist and queer stuff. She helped start a lesbian group in the performance studies program at NYU where we met, and her bookcases were full of women writers from academic Judith Butler to the dyke mystery guru Barbara Wilson and sci-fi Octavia Butler. But I'd nip into her shelves, then pass on and fish searching for a different book. Oh, sorry, me. I'd dip into her shelves, then pass on and fish searching for a different book. Um, so I know obviously who Judith Butler is. I wonder how much of the stuff that she put in here was specifically so that when the young queerios read this, they like don't write it off as turfy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I don't think the author is like a current like turf activist, you know? I get the sense that she's kind of left that like activism. She's kind of moved on to a different stage of her life or something. But like this Judith Butler thing, I'm like, was it actually Judith Butler or not? You know what I'm saying? And I don't know who Barbara Wilson, the dyke mystery guru Barbara Wilson. Who the fuck is that? Also, what year did Judith Butler start becoming a thing? Like, what year was her first book published, maybe? Oh! Lambda Award-winning author Barbara Wilson published her first mystery featuring the Seattle print Pan Nielsen in 1984. Satiric with a political twist, Murder in the Collective. Oh my god! I'm like, who is this? Yo. Murder in the Collective. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh so loudly directly into the mic. I'm literally like, who is this woman? I have like a book by her right there. Okay. Let's keep going on. Matt Adams says I make sure to use lesbian instead of using gay or anything so people know upfront I am exclusionary. LOL. Yeah, I use lesbian or homosexual when I'm like around people and I'm trying to be like I am a homo like I actually am thinking that I might even start using like lesbian like instead of when somebody asking my sexuality, I might even be like lesbian feminist or lesbian separatist or something. Cuz I really want to make it clear like I'm not cool with any of the fucking shit going on. Oh, that's slightly better. Matt Adams says I make sure to oh, that's what I just read. Okay, let's keep going. Gradually, the room filled up with women. Some were around my age, 26, others still in college, some old enough to have grown kids, but all a little nervous and eager. Nobody foamed at the mouth or anything, though. Nobody brandished a sword or a cape or breast. The first meeting of the Lesbian Avengers was actually kind of bureaucratic. The way somebody officially called the meeting to order and the six organizers introduced themselves. I already knew the funny freckled Marie Honan. Okay, how do you pronounce that? Honan? Marie Honan and Anne Maguire with her riotous red hair. The writer, Sarah Schulman, she's on my to read list, and Professor Maxine Wolfe had worked with Ilgo, so I'd met them too. Sarah was more blunt than the yearning narrator of After Dolores. Long haired Max was efficient and expansive, the born teacher. There was also an angular androgynous dyke, Anne Christine D- Dadesky, who turned out to be a journalist, and a short one with dark hair and bright red lipsticks who spoke so softly you could barely hear her. That was the playwright, Anna Simo. After them, it was our turn. None of the names stuck at first, but I remember the multitude of accents: Hispanic, British, Irish, East Coast, West Coast, flat Midwestern, my faint Kentucky swang, and even a few homegrown New York drawls. She spelled New York like that. Okay. Wait, Dragon, love the title. You love the title of this book or The Murder in the Collective? Because when I read that and I know it's like the time period it's written and that it's written by a lesbian, I'm like, so is this like a lesbian feminist collective where there's like a murder mystery? That's like pretty fucking interesting. I definitely like. I'm gonna read it. Obviously, okay. Um, right. After them, it was our turn. None of the names stuck at first, but I remember the Oh, sorry. Then Sarah or somebody talked just enough to lay out what the group Lesbians Avengers was supposed to be. Quote, a direct action group focused on issues vital to lesbian survival and visibility, end quote. Dragon Fox, are you a fire eater? Were you a lesbian Avenger? In what context did you eat fire? Please expand on this. Okay. So, a direct action group focused on issues vital to lesbian survival and visibility. And I nodded my head like I understood, though the phrase quote unquote direct action didn't mean much to me. The closest I'd come to organizing anything was the time back in Louisville when I tried to get the kids in my youth choir to protest the sudden firing of the Minister of Music. Deb was a kind, energetic woman. I babysat her kid. When I came to her defense, the pastor denounced me in private as a confused little girl, then in public as an agitator, and I'd faded in shame. Quote unquote visibility didn't mean anything either, except in the most basic sense. I'd never thought about how the world changed, or about the world at all for that matter. Martin Luther King gave a speech, and that was that. Public schools were desegregated, white teachers were horrible to black kids, and young white girls got their asses ground in the hallways by young black guys getting their own back. I'd been to NOW, which is the National Organization of Women. I know this is superficial, but I love Benji's hair. Oh my god, I've actually been kind of like having this kind of internal monologue with myself. Like, when I spend money on clothing, most of the time, like, it's like, is this comfortable? Is this practical? And then I just choose like crazy bright colors for fun, right? Like this shirt, for example, is like a hand-me-down that I stole. I stole it from my dad. It's what happened. It's from the 90s. But like my hair, it's like my one like vanity. It's the one thing like when I'm not in either I'm buzzing it or I'm dying and doing crazy things to it. There's no in between. It's like either I'm like a gluten-free vegan or I eat everything. There's no in between. So I'm kind of like having like an internal dialogue about like, you know, like is if I think the beauty whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like about my values and principles and like am I living according to them? No, don't be sorry. Like I also just generally like the mullet thing. I actually want to grow out the sides more and have like a mullet that everything is incorporated into it. Good hair though. I know. I like the mullet thing. It's kind of cool, right? Um I've had like almost entirely um like a buzzed head or like a very thin mohawk, like maybe 2/3 of this width and like straight and that's it, just like that, and then it kept buzzing the sides. It was good for like when I was in university and really broke that I didn't have to pay to get a haircut. And also just like as a lesbian, it's really hard to like or like masculine, whatever, lesbian. Like I want when I go to the barber first of all, I'll go to the barber, not the hairdresser. Every time I've gone to the hairdresser, I'll be like, I want like this haircut and like show them. And they will like feminize it. Like they'll like round out the sides and they won't like shave the back into like sharp corners. And like instead of they'll do like a faux hawk where like everything fades in instead of like actually and I'm like, I tell them what I want when I go to like a hairstylist and they give me some fucking women's bullshit. No offense to women, but like that's not what I asked for. Yeah. So I go to barber shops. But then it's like barbershops are generally better. Like even where I live, it's like a very Muslim area. There's all these barbershops that are like it's clearly like run by and for Muslim dudes. Like the only English part of the entire company is like the sign outside. And anyway, but it's like so basic. It's like I come in, this is the picture, or I just buzz my head this way, cut this, they did it, I leave. So basic and like but now I found a female barber who I like and she's like francophone so I can speak French with her. It's nice. Um yeah. Anyway, enough about hair. I literally was like, this is my vanity. I'm highly quibbling about like, what am I supposed to like? Is this? And then I fucking talk about it for like 5 minutes. Okay. Ahem. Okay. Right. Okay. I'd been to the National Organization of Women's March on Washington in 1989 to photograph the marchers for an installation I was doing with some artists friends in Cincinnati. But they had to identify the VIPs. But they had to identify the VIPs in the shots. Quote, oh my god, you got Gloria Steinem. Really? End quote. But this idea of going to the source, aiming to change what people thought, how they saw each other, how they saw us, was something new to me. That first lesbian Avenger meeting, sweating in the metal chairs, I was really just there to be among the girls and to find out if I belonged. I wanted to. Anybody would. I can almost feel the gape mouthed awe of watching the organizers talk about something called the Rainbow Curriculum and why they decided our first action should be in support of it. I didn't say much, though plenty of others did. All the dykes there seemed so incredibly smart, creative, beautiful, adventurous, ready to take their place in the world and I there I was with them. Pretty soon, we broke up into 5 or 6 groups and got to work. There was research to do, flyers to design, interviews to place, money to raise, and strategies and ideas to hash out, preferably involving balloons. Successful actions don't organize themselves. Pinwheel says she does her own hair because they never do it right. Yeah, I totally feel that. Dragon is talking about Dragon Fox talking about her first time like that she draws pictures for the people and they still don't get it. Like the first time I ever got a short haircut, I was like, okay, I don't think any of you are probably the people in the women of the generation to have watched this. But like any of you read the Naruto manga? Actually, it's in the anime too. Like early on, like very early, like in the first 10 episodes or the first I think maybe even whatever, very early on in Naruto, there's like a scene where Sakura is like she's like a ninja, right? But because it's like showing that she's vain, that she's like fighting with some guy and some guy grabs her by the back of her hair like in a ninja battle or whatever. And basically she's like, like winning is everything and like I'm better than this and whatever. And she like cuts her hair off while she's fighting with him and then like turns around and stabs him or whatever. But like the manga like end in the anime like when she cuts her hair off it's like a very dramatic look and then she turns around and like looks down at him on the ground like I beat you kind of thing and her hair it's like short in the back because she just like cut off like her hair and then it's like long on the sides like bangs. So I went to yeah, I know. um but yeah, like I drew a picture of that. Like I looked at the manga that I at the time I was so stupid. I actually like went to the store and bought manga instead of reading it online for free. Um I like drew a picture of it and brought it and that was like the first short haircut I ever got. But it was like that plus a rat tail and like I bleached the rat tail. It was like a lime green. Like it was not a good look. But I only had that for a few months, thank God. Anyway, Aquamarina says, I think Benji once did a chat with Carol who spoke about how the old school organizing lesbians all went queer theory and now they advocate for that instead of lesbians. Sad. Yeah. Okay. Suno says, I need to shave my head again. I'm sick of this nest on my head. I can't even wear a headscarf properly and it's cold outside. Yeah. Okay. We're only 30 minutes in and we're almost done chapter 2. I think we'll be able to get through this book pretty quickly, honestly. I find like books like with a narrative or move much faster than nonfiction. Okay. Okay. So, all the dykes there seemed so incredibly smart, creative, beautiful, adventurous, ready to take their place in the world, and there I was with them. Pretty soon. Oh, I already read all of this. I thought I was just going one phrase ahead. No, we finished this paragraph. Okay. Successful actions don't organize themselves. The other day, I was in the Lesbian History Archives out in Brooklyn and saw the sign-up sheet for the first meeting. Something like 50 women attended, and 46 were brave enough to put their John Hancocks down, along with phone numbers and addresses. So, this is like in modern times. She went to the Lesbian History Archives in New York and she saw the sign up sheet for this meeting she attended in the 90s. Oh, yeah, okay. If this is starting in 1993, right, that's what she said at the beginning. If this is starting in 1993, then yeah, Judith Butler is a thing. Oh, VF is here. Hello, you were missed. Okay. Um, right. Remarkably, most were still in the room 2 years later when we'd already mobilized 20,000 lesbians for a 93 Dyke March in DC and sparked 60 other Avengers groups. 60 other Avengers groups from one action. That's insane. That's insane. How do we. Oh my god, I'm so excited to like. How do we do this? We need to do this. Okay. I'm tempted to read out the names one by one and summon them back to me as they were in those days. Ready for anything, fearless, open, generous, and kind, before the bitter end. Holy shit, that is ominous. More dykes came out every week as the word spread, cramming their bodies into the hot, dusty room, jockeying for spots near the windows as flies buzzed around the place and our sweaty legs stuck to the seats. There hadn't been any action yet, but you could feel it coming, even in the committee reports. The research girls came with 2 pages analyzing possible targets until they finally recommended a grade school in the Middle Village, Queens, the heart of District 24. They talked a lot, but there wasn't much discussion afterwards. We said, excellent, great, who the hell really cared? Let's just get moving. We rapidly approved draft flyers, including an alternative list of ABCs to hand out to parents and kids that featured lots of names I'd never heard of, like Urvashi Vaid, who was running something called the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. I'm pretty sure the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force was like a legal group specifically, if I remember correctly, which I'd never heard of. Though, no, no, no. Wasn't the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force like a group that was to like basically be like a network of all of the groups in the US? It was one of those two. Either it was the legal group or it was like the network of all the groups because they were kind of being like we're too like spread out to make like huge political steps. So we need to be like nationally organized. Anyway, whatever. Okay. Um though why would I, coming from Kentucky, writing poems, crisscrossing the streets of New York? I watched cop shows on TV and baseball. The Mets lost. They always did. Nobody was inviting me to black tie fundraisers. Still don't. The Rainbow curriculum that the Board of Ed had developed using games and songs from the Irish ballad to the Mexican hat dance to teach little kids that there were lots of different kinds of people in the world and they should all be respected. We whipped ourselves up with scorn for the homophobic assholes denouncing the whole project as quote unquote gay because of its 446 pages, a whooping 6 mentioned queers, including the book Heather Has Two Mommies. Wow, in 1993, that's pretty awesome. Okay. Which was only an additional reading list, and for that matter was about as insidious as a glass of milk. We also sneered a little at the dykes who would turn up as regularly as Cassandra to point an irate finger and accuse me. and accuse us of setting back the movement 100 years by going anywhere near children. Quote, "My God, they already think we're pedophiles," end quote, they'd wail. We tried to keep it civil, but didn't give an inch. Their discomfort, their desire to play it safe, their avoid confronting taboos, seemed to confirm the rightness of what we were doing. Maxine Wolfe, the college professor, was the was the kind but firm diplomat. Quote, "Maybe this action isn't for you. Why don't you check back in afterwards?" End quote. Dip me in honey and throw me to the lesbians. I definitely, if I start, well, not if, when I start selling pinback buttons again, I'm definitely gonna sell that button. I'm gonna like have a whole section that's like vintage buttons, because like I is that there's like a gay and lesbian archives from the U.S. website that has like a ton of like photos of vintage buttons, and so like obviously a lot of it is about like AIDS and ACT UP and stuff like that, but there's quite a few lesbian stuff in there. Um, Um, Marina says, "What an odd book. It's a bit casual and gossipy. Reminds me of I'm with the band, but with much less Don Jason's. Do you mean Don Juan's? Um, oh, Juicy tells about the rock bands in the 70s and 80s. Um, uh, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting for sure. I've never read. I don't think I've ever read an autobiography before. Is this an autobiography though? I don't know. Okay, whatever. A few walked out and never returned, but most stuck around to see what we did next. They were a little like an audience at an air show, half marveling at our high flying antics, half hoping we would crash and burn. It would be dark when we left the center. Most Avengers would head to the nearby art bar or somewhere else to get a cold beer. Amy and I would head home to the grunge of the East Village and the inferno of the apartment so she could get to work early and I could get to bed. It was like walking through water. The air was still full of heat, and the faint scent of the Hudson lurked underneath the exhausted and pollinating trees. Gradually, I began to sense other forces in the city besides the cracked sidewalks I walked every day, and the figures moving through the streets. Over everything, through it, and all around were the invisible filaments of politics, of bureaucracy, of a decaying, decadent culture that looked under and into its beds and was afraid and made us queers the scapegoats, drafting laws, defunding arts, banning books that merely acknowledged our existence, as if they could force us into moral and political and physical exile, but we refused to go. We shaped our renegade lesbian identity action by action, flyer by flyer. A fundraiser poster featured little giggling girls in front of a blackboard. Like a public service announcement, it demanded, "Do you know where your daughters are? At the Lesbian Avengers back to school party." Carrie Moyer was this bleach blonde artist, did a flyer with a drawing of a superhero dyke flying over the city. She held a balloon reading, "I heart lesbians," and the caption screamed, "The Lesbian Avengers are coming to make the world safe for baby dykes everywhere." It wasn't meant to reassure, not with kids on the same page as lesbian, not with the dyke in a cape and a tights jetting down the sky. We laughed our heads off, there in the center, but we were a little more muted when it came time to go out to Queens and white and wheat paste carries flyers on lampposts and fences. Especially me. I might strip naked and shave myself for art, or wander the streets of the East Village at all hours, but I wasn't ready to claim either the word or the image. Still, I went, giggling nervously and sweating in the New York dusk. One of us stood lookout, while another swabbed the nearest flat surface with wallpaper paste, and the third slapped the poster down before we all scampered away. The newbies among us laughed the loudest, almost hysterical with happiness and fear. The lesbians are coming. The lesbians are coming. Lita's asking if people got notifications. I'm pretty sure that I have been like deboosted by YouTube because my streams yesterday had like 3 viewers, and I think it's because nobody got notifications. Um, Yeah. I'm just gonna turn up the heat a little bit and put on a sweater. I'm kind of cold. Mama, how are you, boo boo? Yeah, Matt Adams saying that she made sure to go and set reminders on my live streams. Yeah, I mean, this week I kind of failed but it was because I was like finishing one book and starting another and wasn't exactly sure what was happening. My plan is, um, for this, oh, nice sign says Pinwheel Art. Aquamarina mailed it to me. Isn't it so cool? Um, but yeah, I think I'm gonna be like more careful about pre-scheduling things. I might even pre-schedule like a live stream that's like 1 week in advance that is actually not 1 week in advance. That is just like this will be the next live stream and you can set a reminder. And that way if I start streaming randomly at a random time, if you set a reminder for the next live stream, you'll get it when I start that one, you know? Anyway. Thank you so much, Ocarina. It's so cool. Okay. Ahem. Chapter 3. On September 2nd, 1992, the first day of school in New York City, I scrounged a token and took the subway out to the Middle Village, Queens, with Amy. Most of the school district was racially mixed, with shops as likely to have Mexican tortillas as Turkish preserves or cartons of kimchi. Middle Village, though, was a mostly white, working class neighborhood that couldn't boast much except a cemetery housing Lucky Luciano and Don Carlo Gambino and the Long Island Expressway. We were the most interesting thing to happen there in ages. And while we could have made a splash if we'd come in black leather and raising our fists like the Black Panthers or Act Up, the Lesbian Avenger Concept Committee decided that we really needed was Sousa. Sousa and Lavender Balloons reading Ask About Lesbian Lives. It was ridiculous, absurd, delightful, though I wouldn't have admitted it then. Jenny Remain, an artist Amy knew from performance studies, pulled together a brass band, kitting them out in the knee socks and plaid skirts of Catholic school uniforms. She herself carried a big bass drum. Some Avengers wore t shirts that read, I was a lesbian child. I turned one down, saying I couldn't afford it, but refused even when Anna Simo, that mild mannered Cuban playwright, offered me a discount. I still cringed at the word lesbian. Wait, Dragon Fox, are you in New York? I definitely am going to go to New York and do like a meetup, 1000%. Like it's pretty close. Well, not that close, but as somebody who does lots of road tripping around North America, it seems close. Okay. Right. Right. Okay. When we were all there, the 60 of us marched down Metropolitan Avenue to the elementary school, PS 87, singing at the top of our lungs. Okay, I know this is like a normal thing. Probably Americans are very like fine with it, but like PS, like public school 87, I find it really creepy the way that American or schools in New York City are listed like that as like numbers. It kind of seems like almost like a prison number or like it just seems like very like dystopian institutionalization or whatever to just be like a number. It's kind of creepy. Anyway, whatever. Okay. Singing at the top of our lungs, oh, when the dykes, oh, when the dykes, oh, when the dykes come marching in. We revised a few other Dixieland standards and proclaimed, We are family. I've got all my sisters with me. One banner read, Teach about lesbian lives, and another, The Lesbian Avengers. Somebody clutched an enormous bunch of balloons, which had created ruckus at the printers, who kept misspelling lesbian. We were met with disbelief, anger, fear, a few approving nods, but mostly the typical New Yorkers' disinterest. Like them, I pretended I was totally cool with it. Hell, I did this kind of thing 4 or 5 times a week. No big deal. Like it was no big deal that when we got to the elementary school, the cops were with their thick blue arms and shiny shoes and tried to get us to leave. As the civil disobedience At the civil disobedience training session, Maxime Wolf explained it was perfectly legal to have a picket and hand out flyers. It was a public sidewalk for crying out loud, and she'd been doing demos since the 60s, first for workers' rights, then women, then people with AIDS. But who knows what cops will do? Nothing, as it turned out. Maybe it was our unshakable knowledge of our rights, or how we continued singing, handing out balloons, giving interviews and flyers, while our negotiators negotiated them with them. Or maybe they just took one look at this group of relatively innocuous females in knee socks and plaid skirts and thought, what the heck, it's New York, let's go get donuts. Matt Adams says I could possibly make it to a New York gathering. That would be exciting. Yeah, when I eventually do meetups, like, when the fucking border opens so I can drive into the US, when I eventually do meetups, I'm going to do it. I'm going to schedule them like 3 months in advance or something, like a really long time in advance. And that way I can like vet all the women and like find a place to do the meetup and all this kind of shit. Um, and hopefully a place to sleep and park my car so I can like take the train into the city or whatever. um, I do not intend to like actually go into New York City with my car. Like I've been to Montreal. That's stressful enough. I'm not doing that. Okay. Um, okay. Dragon Fox says, but I remember the Hispanic girl gangs in the 80s and the men are killing women with alacrity and NY. Some dick put a woman in the hospital with a hammer attack today. Jesus Christ. That's disgusting. Yeah, I've been in the car with my parents when I was a kid when they were driving in New York. Like, I'm not fucking doing that. Like, it's a very walkable city. I'll just park somewhere in the suburbs at someone's house, probably, or something, and take the train. Um, like a friend of a friend of a friend lives in Poughkeepsie. I could even park there and take the train from there. Like, whatever. Okay. More than one kid got their first lesson in the real world when an Avenger handed them a balloon and their red faced mother grabbed it away. No way is my little Sean or Antonio or Karen gonna be like that. As for the Xerox of our alternative alphabet, A for acceptance, action, WH Auden, and WH Auden. What? What? Okay. B for James Baldwin, Rita Mae Brown, and boycotting bigotry. Some got tucked into pockets, other pointedly ripped into shreds, though not in front of me. I stayed with the other picketers, tracing that tiny oval on the sidewalk and avoiding confrontation. Maybe I held a sign for a while, feeling goofy and embarrassed as I always did at so much emotion being displayed. The weather was nice anyway, one of those perfect fall days with dark blue skies and white fluffy clouds that did not send forth lightning bolts or hail or anything at all to kill the lesbians. Nope, nobody died there in front of the schoolyard. Neither were kids converted or perverted or partially traumatized, except their angry moms grabbing their shiny balloons and let them float away. We just signaled to the world we existed. We'd been kids ourselves in school. The only thing different about us as adult lesbians was a few additional years and self awareness, which was just beginning on my part. I don't like this whole thing of like the only difference, like it seems a little. Hmm, the only difference between a kid and an adult is just a few short years. Like, I get that they're trying to be like, support lesbian kids and like, acceptance, like respect your whatever, respect them, anyway, but like that was just a little bit strange. GG says, "Why do gay men call each other sister when they're not gay, when they're not AGP or trans? I don't get it." It's because they literally, it's like they literally, it's like a game for them. They like play with gender. Like that's it. I think like that they're feminine. They're trying to like own that they're like. like emasculated men or whatever the fuck it is that they think. Matt Adams says, yes, it's a fine line between mentors and groomers. Yeah. Lita said the exact same thing like 1 second later. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Eleanor says they're performing femininity, they think. Yeah. Like, it's like misogynistic. They're basically being like, because they're feminine, like, oh, I'm basically a woman. That's like misogynistic. Okay. Okay. Funny. I write that like it's nothing, just signaling to the world we exist. What if it was when it was like setting off a bomb? What else could it be? Lesbians plus elementary school children. We left en masse when the last student entered the school. In those days, bigots would sometimes haunt queer demos, grab a few stranglers, and beat the crap out of them. So, together, the Avengers set off for their day jobs, or classes, or coffee shops. The media dykes went to send more press releases, and I remember at the next meeting, Maxine or Anna or somebody arrived triumphantly waving a copy of Newsday and other rags that had covered the demo. We'd done it. We'd launched the Lesbian Avengers, and the city had taken note. So I guess what she's saying is that the point of the protest wasn't only like for the people physically there, but it was more like to get media attention. It kind of reminds me of like Zaps, which was like the Gay Liberation Front. A Zap is like a direct action like this, but it's like supposed to be like really over the top, dramatic and sensationalized and like crazy and theatrical and shit, specifically to get media attention. That kind of what this reminds me of. Okay. No, I don't know anything about that. Toss stones. Where is that from? Okay. Oh, bye, Pinwheel. Okay. Also, I need to order food at some point. When I'm done this chapter, I'm going to order food. Okay. Not everybody was happy about it. Homophobe in chief, Mary A. Cummings, worked twice as hard to kill the rainbow curriculum. She was a white haired grandmother and president of the school board in District 24, where we'd taken our balloons, and she worked that white hair for all it was worth. Quote, look how nice I am, how innocent, how mean the homos are to me. End quote. Her specialty was forging unholy alliances, and she pulled one off with Cardinal John O'Connor and the evangelical Pat Robertson. But the real coup was dragging in New York's African American and Latino churches in a kind of rainbow of hate. It's so fucking ironic. Oh, and a group from New York. No, I don't know anything about that. No, but Gigi, don't you know that associating effeminacy with top or bottom, or masculinity with top or bottom, is homophobic? So even though what you're saying is literally what's happening, actually it's homophobic to notice that. Okay. Of course, Cummings and her lily white board had no ulterior motives, like seeing the whole multicultural thing dumped. It was just a fluke of a few years later, a few years later, in 94, when District 24 elected Louisa M. Chan its first minority school board member, and Miss Cummings immediately attacked her behind closed doors as a know-nothing chink. Okay, shit, I didn't mean, I was just reading. Next time I will not say the word. Sorry. Okay. Um, Cummings denied the allegations, although, in another session packed with press, she went on to call Chan, quote unquote, an evil, wicked woman, declaring, I'll say what I like as long as I'm an American. Chan responded, I'm an American too. Suno said, "Yeah, I heard some people of color conservatives say that homosexuality was invented so that people of color reproduce less." But like that actually has nothing to do with homosexuality. That's entirely to do with misogyny. They don't want women to stop being mothers. That's it. That's what the problem is. The institution of motherhood is like essential to patriarchy. With if women stop having sex, like okay, obviously lesbians can have kids, but like it's not the same thing under patriarchy, right? If the women stop having sex with the men of their own race, they're not going to keep like this was mentioned in the philosophy book, both from the people of color side and from the white side. She talks about the Ku Klux Klan and how they had like propaganda and like whatever um content talking about how like white people are soon going to be outnumbered in the US and like talking about the immigration rates in Canada and how it was like a threat to white people, and so it was like we need to like reproduce and have more babies, and like the white women need to like work with the white men because white people like need to survive or whatever. And then on the flip side, um I've heard this from Jewish women, or isn't it in the have any of you guys watched Orthodox on Netflix? They literally tell her, and I've heard this from Jewish women, like, you need to have babies to replace the Jews who died, the Jewish people who died, right? So like this is not a unique thing. This has nothing to do with homosexuality. It has to do with men trying to exert control. Um anyway. Okay. Okay. So like it is about homosexuality, but it's more about women saying, "Oh yeah, I will never be with a man and I will never have sex with a man." Um yeah. Okay. That's what we were saying also, just by taking to the streets, but Republicans didn't accept it. Played one minority against each other, defining just who a real American was. Sometimes immigrants were, sometimes not. In his speech to the 92 Republican National Convention, Pat Buchanan used quote unquote brave people of Koreatown to slam the black, welfare ridden mobs of the LA riots, setting everybody against the bra burning feminists, tree huggers, and of course, homosexuals. It was a culture war, a holy war, he declared, for the soul of America. Extremist Christians would do anything to save it, including bombing abortion clinics and dipping into their filthy minds to create videotapes, quote unquote, proving that lesbians and gay men did nothing but have orgies with animals and babies and assorted inanimate objects, snacking on fecal matter between rapes. Holy shit. Okay. I didn't expect this book to be like this. Yes, Tossstone said WTF. That is exactly my feeling right now. WTF did I just read? Let's keep moving. Okay. Because, like, this homophobic stuff that she just talked about, these people, like, proving that gay people are, like, having sex with many bad things in bad ways. Um, it plays into, like, the really, like, ancient homophobia of, like, or not even ancient. I mean, I guess it depends where you are. But like you're not like a lesbian. Like a woman did something to you and then she made you a lesbian, right? Like there's this idea a lot that like in gay male sex, like an more ancient perspective was that like the only reason that would ever happen was because like a guy forced himself on you, right? And like that very much plays into all the stuff she just said here. Like it's not shocking or anything. Okay. Okay. Anyway, in California, anti gay activists perfected divide and conquer when they defined lesbians and gay men as, quote, a rich class demanding special rights at the expense of true minorities, end quote. Which didn't seem like a lie because the visible leaders of the movement were almost exclusively white and privileged and male. Yeah. Um, because, like, in the gay, like, liberation and later, like, as it turned into, like, a gay rights, less liberation and more gay rights movement, it was like they were really, really concerned with their image. A lot of the I mean, this isn't like the whole story, but part of it was that these organizations were really concerned with their image because they were basically like, we are going to be like the first gay people on a talk show, the first gay people like in a protest being put on the news, right? They were like, we need like if you like look really early on, like in the homophile movement and stuff, they were like they literally would have, like, dress codes for protests. Like, women couldn't look butch in the protests because they thought it would scare people, and they were like, "We are the first, like, visibility of this, so we need to make it look right." So, as a result of this, and also because there wasn't, like, government funding and stuff for gay rights, right? So, these organizations, a lot of them was, like, a group of people and then, like, one person with a lot of money, especially the ones in California. They had, like, a lot of big legal groups before any other states had them. And it was because like a bunch of the Hollywood dudes who had money were like, yeah, this is important to us. We're going to fund it. So like, yeah, definitely this is what happened. Like the people who were the spokespeople like had money or like had money behind them. So, were like approved by the rich people. Yeah. And that they all looked like they wanted to look like all American, right? Like palatable to the public. Really, MB? MB says child marriage is still legal in Cali with no lower age limit. There's no lower age limit on marriage in California. So like an actual child could marry an actual adult in California. Child marriage is still technically legal in at least 20 states in the US. Yeah, but okay, not to be like this is okay, but I thought the situation was that there was a lower age limit, but it was like really low. It was like yeah, I thought it was like 12. Like I thought there was a number, but it was like ridiculously young. Suno says I think Massachusetts is 12 years old. Yeah. Um I know that in Quebec in Canada the you can legally get married at 14 with your parents' approval. Yeah, with parental consent and a court order still seems suspicious. Um yeah. MB says Cali is only if not is is one if not only the only one without a lower age limit. That is fucking disturbing as hell and fucked up. Okay. This is supposed to be like us getting hopeful and shit. This is like very depressing. No offense. Like it's important and everything, but like this is me having a good day, guys. Okay. Okay. Right. In New York City, plenty eagerly swallowed the hook. The mostly black District 29 decided that it was better to dump the curriculum, let their kids pay the price, than extend a mere 6 pages of respect to queers. So it was like she said before, this rainbow curriculum um, was like 447 pages, and there was like 6 pages that even mentioned anything queer. Well, she says queer, but do you think they were using that word in this curriculum? Probably not. I don't know. Okay. In 1993 or whatever, 1994. I don't think so. Okay. Thousands of Black and Hispanic parents marched on the Board of Education and flooded every hearing. No way they had anything in common with the rich white purrs. No way they were going to let the Chancellor of Schools, Joe Fernandez, turn their kids into sodomites. He even wanted to hand out rubbers in high school. What was the world coming to? The Avengers who attended the hearings would come back shaken at seeing the whole gamut of human faces so contorted with hate. When we spoke in favor of the curriculum, they screamed at us, stomped, threw chairs, and pumped fists. in dykes and faggots' faces, even if some of us were black or Latina like them. When I was 16, yeah, I must have been 16. When I was 16 at my high school, I was like the leader of the like gay club. Actually, was I the leader yet? No, I think I became the leader next year. But I was kind of like the leader in terms of like I would never shut the fuck up and was like always bringing up topics and like getting people together and shit. So whatever. I was very involved and it was quite small. Anyway, so this was in a Catholic school in Toronto and I think this was in 2012 or 2013. I can't remember, but there was like a school board meeting. I didn't learn about the Catholic school board, the Toronto Catholic school board meeting where they one of the agenda items was whether or not to ban gay clubs in the high schools. And okay, like let's all suspend our thoughts on like queer theory and like the toxic ideology spreading and all that shit. Just put yourself in my shoes. So I was like a trans guy, whatever. And like regardless of my identity at that time, clearly I am like an LGBT, like I belonged, right? Anyway, so we heard this meeting was happening. I didn't have I think I could have written something and just gone up and spoken without signing up ahead of time, but I think I was just too nervous and scared, so I didn't. Anyway, but we went because the Toronto Catholic District School Board was like right on the subway. So me and a couple of my friends went to it. So because we thought even if we don't speak, we can at least be there in person to support the people who speak. Anyway, I think that was the most overt homophobia I've ever experienced in my life. There was this one mom in particular who was wearing like 10 t-shirts and throughout her like rant she was taking off the t-shirts and each one of them had like a different message underneath and like she was talking about how if you like mention gay stuff in school you're going to make the kids gay and like you're confusing them and like whatever and it was just like I'm pretty sure a couple of them referenced that passage in the Bible where it was like you're supposed to stone the gays and like you're a Catholic school, so why are you fucking letting the gays like, brainwash our children and stuff like that. Um but like I had never actually seen like a real human in front of me who was being like, "Yes, we should kill gay people" until that point. Um it was very um fucked up. Eleanor says there's no way we would have had a gay club at my Catholic school. We were not even allowed to wear trousers. We campaigned for that. Yeah, MB says thank you for the readings, Benji. It's been nice to sit and listen. Oh, I'm so glad, MB. Um, but yeah, uh, I don't know. So just reading that reminded me of that. It was a girls' school. But you have to keep in mind that like the Toronto Catholic School Board is in Toronto, which is like a very progressive metropolitan area. Like, you don't need to be Catholic to go to Catholic school because it's, like, publicly funded. So, like, a ton of like, especially if it's just, like, a good school that's, like, close to your house, a lot of kids will just go to that school even though it's Catholic. Like, this is not, like, most Catholic students, but I'm saying there are quite a few students at Catholic schools that are, like, not religious at all. So, like, even though Catholic schools have, like, prayers and the announcements and stuff like that, and like you have like mass once a month or whatever. Like when I was in Catholic school, a lot of us didn't take communion because we'd never done our first communion. Like we still had to go to mass, but it's just like it was religious, but it wasn't like super religious if you get what I mean. Like I don't think if we had been like in a different area that wasn't Toronto, I don't think it would have been that way. Matt Adams says this is why I hate the trans lumped in with gays and bisexual people. I think homosexual kids should have support, but I also don't want gender affirmation happening. Yeah, 'cause it's like I was looking for support and then I became, like, gender affirmed instead, which is like, it's support, but it's supporting your internalized homophobia. Like, that's not what you were looking for, is it? Um, exactly. VF says, "I'd rather gays not have support than trans the gay away. It shouldn't be in high schools." Yeah. I mean, at this point, there's no way to, like, draw a line, right? Um, like before gay clubs, like my ex was a good example of this, and I've talked to older lesbians who are like very visibly gay, who were like, "Oh yeah, at my high school in the 90s or in the 80s or whatever, we didn't have like a gay club, obviously." But she was like, there was the handful of kids who were visibly gay, and the other gay kids would like gather around them and they would like create their own little social group of like support just because they were like a minority in the situation, right? Um, so I'm sure even if there wasn't like gay clubs in school, they could like just do it unofficially, you know what I mean? Like, um, anyway. Suno says I'd rather commit tax fraud than have my money go to religion. Fucking A, man. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, the N word is on this page. Great. Okay. That was sarcastic, obviously. Okay. Um Okay, but guys, everything that you're saying that you didn't have gay clubs, it doesn't mean much to me if you don't tell me what year it was. Like if you went to high school in the 80s, this is not surprising. Yeah. Okay. I signed up to go but chickened out. I didn't want to be there when it finally erupted, the mass anti-gay lynch mob. Everybody knew about the murders of black kids at Howard Beach and Bensonhurst. But queers were getting killed too, and not just by AIDS. The year 1992 had started with a student in Alabama shooting a member of Auburn's lesbian and gay organization from his dormitory window. In March, a gang of kids, the youngest 8 years old, shot a bartender in Norfolk, Virginia, gay bar just because they wanted to quote unquote mess with some gays. In April, an off-duty cop and his pal attacked a couple of dykes in Methuen, Massachusetts. In May, in the Detroit suburbs, a lesbian couple was shot and killed in their front yard by a neighbor. And these were just the cases that got attention. In New York, queers were regularly murdered and dumped in the Hudson. Transgendered people and drag queens, many of them black and Hispanic, disappeared without a trace. We'd all been harassed, some of us beaten. Again, I'm like, is she I almost feel like, I mean, we're only in chapter 3, like we haven't gotten very much through the book, but I get this sense that she has been very intentional about what references she makes and what she taught, like right here where she's like the black and Hispanic drag queens and transgender people. Like, I'm not saying that it's not important and it didn't happen. It just feels to me like strategic. I feel like the way that this book is written at this point is that she's trying to make it like eligible to be like a required reading in a university course on gay history. That's what I feel like she's trying to do with this book. Because I know some people who have been. I actually know a couple of women who peaked because they were like academic queer theorists, and then they were like, because they were dealing with it, they were like, this doesn't make any sense. But like, um, a lot of these kind of books, they don't really sell. So the only and like the bookshops that sell them, they close down, and the only way they stay open, like I know this about Glad Day Bookshop in Toronto. They have like an exclusive contract or something like that with U of T. And so all the queer courses at U of T, like to get the books, you have to buy them through the Glad Day Bookshop. And it's like I think a lot of authors now with doing something like this realize the only way to get like a steady income stream out of it is to make it applicable, like a potentially useful in a university course. Um, anyway. Tossstone says 80s we had nothing at school, so I was a dedicated truant. I was a truant, but like I wasn't trying to be. I just had like really crippling anxiety. So I would like take the subway to school and then be like, you know what? I didn't do any of my homework today. So even though I love my teachers and I love being in class, I'm so ashamed and anxious and having panic attacks about this. I'm gonna go and sit at McDonald's for the entire school day and like read Andrea Dworkin or watch Netflix or something, and then just go home and pretend I went to school. I did that so much in like grade 11 and 12. Um, Lita says, I feel like a lot of truants didn't necessarily miss much. I totally agree. Tossstone says, is Sylvia Beach Bookshop still open in Paris? What is that? You know, there's that, is it Charing Cross in London? There's that street with like all the bookstores. They must have a women's bookstore on that street, no? Like, even if it's like queer captured, they must have one. No? I mean, I literally Googled it. I assume if it existed, like the location and hours and everything would pop up and phone number and stuff. So nothing came up. So I assume it's closed. Um, Suno says sometimes I just leave the English class because I'm the best in the class anyway. Yeah, like I literally never did my homework for English. I just would read the book on the first day, the whole book, and then I wouldn't do any of the homework about it. But I was really good at doing the essays and the tests. And so I would just do the essays and the tests, and this would get me like 60 or 70 in my classes and get me to pass. And I was like, good enough. Eleanor, are you in London? Can you check? Tossstone says it was the first women's bookstore. Oh, very interesting. Gigi says I was a truant because I couldn't wake up before noon. Lol. VF. So astute. If the cost of these groups is cutting off your tits, we're way better off without them. Couldn't have said it better myself. 1 second. Okay, there's actually like a cello student in the house, so I cannot order food. Well, I mean, I technically I'm like allowed, like it's fine, but I'm not doing that when there's a student here. Like, let them have their fucking lesson. Okay. Right. If you'd have gotten out a US map and colored in a bright red dot for every attack, huge crimson spears would have covered places like Oregon, where the Christian right was in the throes of an anti-gay campaign. They wanted it set down in black and white of their constituent of their constitution, sorry, that we were child molesting monsters, not worthy of homes or jobs or even life. Their foot soldiers destroyed the offices of LGBT organizations, beat up queers. In Salem, Oregon, skinheads spent months harassing Brian Mock, a white, gay, disabled guy. First, they just called him names. Then they threw things at the rooming house where he lived. They finally beat him so badly he could barely move and his face was unrecognizable. When his friend, African American lesbian Hattie Mae Cohen's, tried to step in and protect him, she became a victim too. On September 27th, 1992, at 3:18 a.m., the four wannabe Nazis tossed a Molotov cocktail at their rooming house, burning them both alive. N-word dyke, the skinheads jeered as they watched the burning building, uniting us minorities as objects of hate, whether we wanted it or not. Oh, it's a different situation for you than Suno. Um, what's your first language, Suno? I wonder. I don't know what your name like. Your name doesn't immediately to me sound like like Russian or Italian or something. Like, what is that? Okay. Like my first spoken language is English, but my first reading and written language is French. Like my parents, like I learned English, and then like my kindergarten and everything was French. Okay. Um, okay. So chapter 4. Oh, you are Russian. Interesting. I suddenly don't know how to say hello in Russian. Well, whatever. Okay. Like today somebody told me they it's a Toki Pona phrase. I don't know what that means. Spasiba, thank you. Um I'm lucky that I'm bilingual. Yes. I wish I my dad speaks like so many languages. Like he doesn't speak Ukrainian, but his parents speak Ukrainian and my dad speaks Russian and low German and proper German. Um and I didn't learn any of them. I feel like it would have been really useful um to learn German because the German education system is pretty rad. I would like it, especially as a musician, it would have been cool to go there for university. Anyway, okay. How far are we into 100? So only an hour and 20 minutes, and we're going really slow. Okay. Like I looked at the actual page numbers and we're not moving very fast. Not long after the murders in Oregon, the New York City Anti Violence Project, AVP, asked the Avengers to join them in a protest march on October 30th, the night before the big Halloween parade. I saw it for the first time in '89. I was on my way to get falafel after a class at NYU when I got caught up in a shocking mob of drag queens all dressed up as the Pope and his cardinals with enormous red hats and robes. There were also a bloody Marie Antoinette and her courtiers with giant wigs and sequins. Huge puppets, practically fresh off the bus. I'd only seen drag queens at the one gay dive in Lexington where I went to college. They were like my furious sister, Vicky, who also had big hair, extravagant blue eyeshadow, and sometimes drew her knife like fingernails down whatever was nearest my arm, back, neck. Okay. Drag is misogynist. I'm not going to expand on that. Let's move on. It was dark and there were barriers everywhere, sending me off into a maze of narrow streets that were stuffed with white suburbanites loaded with plastic cups and beer bottles and flasks trying to get glimpses of the freaks. They wore Batman and Catwoman masks or powdered white faces made up of as sadistic jokers. Others came as themselves, with the acid-washed blue jeans and matching jackets of the bridge and tunnel crowd. I was the Hickster ingenue, authentically shabby in my army jacket and holey shoes with that Irish girl made me shoes that the Irish girls made me throw away a year later. How can you wear these stinking things? um, Knife like nails, but that's that whole thing of like femininity is empowering, like what is it, like eyeshadow that could kill a man or eyeliner that could stab a man or whatever. Like, have you seen? Sorry, I dropped the book onto the table. Have you seen um like because I was a drive-through worker for a long time when I worked in McDonald's. Have you seen these women with fingernails? It's like they have a disability. Like they have like intentionally disabled themselves. Like there are things they cannot do because their fingernails prevent them from doing it. Like it's kind of like how heels prevent you from running, but like in a much you need your hands for so many things. And like why are they doing it? Because they think it looks nice? Like I really think this whole like, oh, it's so cool, like it's so like powerful, like oh, like it's like really fucking it's like propaganda. It's disgusting. Okay. No, this is in New York City in the 90s. Okay. It was dark and there were barriers everywhere, sending me off into a maze of narrow streets that were stuffed with white suburbanites, loaded with plastic cups and beer bottles and flasks, trying to get a glimpse of the freaks. Oh, sorry, we just read that. Okay. Oh, yeah, the Irish girl made her throw away her shoes. Okay. Music blasted from the floats in the bars, along with laughter, shouts. Glass shattered in the distance. People smashed up against me, sometimes excusing themselves, mostly not. I couldn't breathe, never made it to Mamoun's falafel. Just got the hell out of the crush and descended into the nearest functioning subway station. The train had already been pelted with eggs and whatever else the mob of teenagers found. There were three there there was that plastic string stuff everywhere and graffiti scrawled on seats and the subway maps. All the working people looked warily at the platforms when their trains stopped and the doors opened. They were still full of kids unleashing chaos, covering the city with garbage, broken bottles, broken eggshells, and the tempera of drying yolk and blood. I learned that was a typical Halloween, with the blood often belonging to queers. That was why AVP, which is the Anti Violence Project, was holding the anti violence march and also warning every queer they could find to skip the Halloween night parade. The year before, there had been even more anti gay attacks than usual. The Avengers said yes to the march and a big fat no to staying home when things heated up. It would make a mockery of any effort to take back the night, as the protest march was called. Otherwise, you'd have to rename it Take Back One Night or Take Back the Nights That Aren't Too Troublesome and Don't Require Very Much Effort. Remembering the Oregon murderers, remembering the Oregon murders, we decided to build a shrine to Hattie Mae Cohen's and Brian Mock at Father Demo Square in the village and plant ourselves there from the chaos of Halloween Eve through Election Day. Jennifer Monson, a wiry dyke with strawberry blonde hair and a sideways way of talking, suggested we transform the image of their deaths by learning to eat fire. She turned out to be a dancer and a choreographer with a bunch of friends in alternative circuses. A couple of days before the march, Amy and I and some others found ourselves in Brooklyn with jars of lighter fluid, rags, and a bunch of metal hangers in a room filled with juggling pins and swords and stilts. I hadn't meant to learn. I was mostly tagging along with Amy, who was really into it, and seeing who else would turn up. Okay. There were a dozen of us or so, all about my age or younger, all white too. When I asked Marlene Kolmberg, this older African American dyke, if she was going to learn because she was as tough as anybody and had a lot of flair, she just laughed and said, "Are you kidding?" Another black woman said it was nuts too, that her people had better sense than that, though she was even younger than me, and paid her tuition dancing in a bar. When we got there, Jennifer Monson introduced us to her friend, Jennifer Miller, the director of Circus Amok, the one ring, gender bending spectacle of political agitators, jugglers, and tightrope walkers. She showed us all how to wrap a little bit of the rag around the end of the hanger, not too big or the flame will be enormous, then dip it in lighter fluid or kerosene. Lighter fluid tasted less gross. You tilt your head back so the approaching flame doesn't burn off your nose or hair, and insert it into your mouth as you exhale slightly. Close your lip, it's extinguished. Make a mistake and inhale, your lungs explode and you die. It was harder in Jennifer Miller's case because she was a bearded lady and her face was flammable. Okay. But I still balked when it came down to it, even with my short hair and smooth cheeks. If you want to talk about unnatural acts, bringing fire towards your face clearly qualifies. Sticking it in your mouth is downright nuts. But I didn't want to look like a wimp in front of the others, so I grabbed a torch, lit it, tilted my head back, opened my mouth, exhaling in a great gust. I could eat fire, if it was nothing at all. We practiced until we could do it with aplomb, in unison. We even learned to light the torches from each other's flaming tongues. We started to pick up each other's names. Sarah, Michelle, Allison were all roommates at a loft on Avenue D. Then there was Sindra, Rachel, Lysander, and the Jennifers. It was a bonding experience. We became friends, some of us lovers. It was chilly and dark at Father Demo Square. The streetlights barely shone. You could hear the march coming from blocks away, with whistles and chants, the call and response of "Whose streets? Our streets," as we reclaimed the village, making it safe. Suddenly, the marchers were around us, a nervous, angry crowd with signs "No on 9" and the anti-gay organ measure, "Bigots go home," and "Justice for Marsha," a murdered black drag queen and trans activist the cops were ignoring. Okay, okay. She literally just said "Justice for Marsha," a murdered black drag queen and trans activist the cops were ignoring. Okay. Was Marsha murdered? Yes. Were the cops ignoring it? Yes. Was Marsha a trans activist? Marsha was a man who called himself a homosexual, who was part of the transvestite, what is it, star. What does star stand for? It's like safety, transact, but it's like it has the word transvestite in it. Like he literally was like, I am a transvestite. It has nothing to do. Matt Adams says, yep, there's the history rewrite. Like, I really feel like she wanted this book to be consumable to the queer masses. So that's pretty disappointing because that probably means she excluded a bunch of stuff that would be really interesting to, like, us, right? Okay. Lysander climbed up on a plastic milk crate in front of our homemade shrine, and we formed lines off to her right and left. She was a deeply religious person who wore an Elmer Fudd cap. Even the other Avengers handed out candles, and the small crowd lit them as Lysander began to read from her notes. It was as much a homily as an activist speech. Her voice shook a little, but the people fell silent as she talked, first about nearby dyke bashing, where a gang of kids attacked two lesbians just for embracing, then about Oregon, where Hattie Mae Cohen's and Brian Mock had been burned alive. Quote, we lesbian Avengers have built this shrine. It stands for our fear. It stands for our grief. It stands for our rage. And it enshrines our intention to live fully and completely as who we are, wherever we are. We take the fire of action into our hearts, and we take it into our bodies, and we stand here and now to make it known that we were here, and here we will stay. Our fear does not consume us. Their fire will not consume us. We take that fire and we make it our own. End quote. And Lysander touched the torch to her tongue, where the flame stayed lit long enough to light a second torch, and the Avengers to her right and left lit their own, and so the fire passed down the line from tongue to tongue, and on my side, from Rachel to me, then Sarah, then Allison, her roommate, and we raised our flames triumphantly into the air and leaned back and swallowed them down. The crowd cheered, a little uncertainly, at watching a circus trick performed into a sacrament. I took a couple of shifts at the shrine encampment. The village was one of the most gay friendly places in the city, and also the most dangerous because the homophobes knew where to find us. And there we were, handing out leaflets with the words gay and lesbian smack dab on the front, explaining how violence and murders followed hateful anti gay campaigns like sharks followed the scent of blood. I remember being cold and sitting on scrounged cardboard to keep the damp from rising up through the concrete. An outreach worker to the homeless brought warm blankets that we returned when it was over. We peed in the coffee shop at the corner. The revelers of Halloween came and went like the fading light. We stood vigil and bled into the gray city. Sometimes the other queers joined us for a while, lighting candles for their friends who were dead from the violence or AIDS. The sidewalk was a constellation. People brought us slices of pizza and paper cups of coffee. Somebody brought the news that the Vatican had finally lifted the Inquisition edict against Galileo. The world did revolve around the sun. More than one romance was born when Avengers huddled together. It became hard to leave after your shift. Part of you wanted to stay there forever, claiming, at the very least, that corner of the city, inserting yourself as a speck in the public eye. We packed up on election day and took stock of things at the next meeting. The liberal darling, Bill Clinton, dethroned George Herbert Walker Bush, but the queers still got creamed. In Oregon, where Hattie Mae and Brian were murdered, tons of local anti gay laws got passed, though the statewide initiative failed. A lot of cities, like Tampa, dumped pro gay ordinances. Probably the biggest victory for the Christian white was in Colorado, where they passed a statewide amendment making it legal to kick us out of our jobs, our apartments, even the hospital. We hissed in frustration. Queers couldn't keep up. More anti gay campaigns started every day, and each was followed by violence. If we were going to get anywhere, we had to rouse a national press that was mostly ignoring the story. Somebody had to knock on their door, beat on it if they had to, and announce the casualties of the quote unquote culture war. What good was it being in New York if the Avengers didn't answer the call? On November 19th, a couple of weeks after the encampment, we met outside the Plaza Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. It was rush hour, and Fifth Avenue was a river of angry light. Our marshals quickly blocked the traffic, and before the cops could do anything, we'd taken to the streets. A bunch of us had torches made out of small sticks gleaned from the trees at Tompkins Square Park in the East Village, wrapped with rags. When we lit them, the cops moved in, warning us we weren't allowed to have open flames. Hell, we weren't allowed to do a lot of things, but that wasn't going to stop us. There, on Fifth Avenue, the skyscrapers rising up on either side, we burned dikes. We burning dikes took off down the street with the cops in hot pursuit. At first, when they caught us, they'd just put out the torch, drop it on the ground, then move on. It took them a while to notice somebody else would pick it up, relight it, and take off again, playing cat and flaming mouse. It was just about the last one. Oh, sorry, I was just about the last one with my torch held high, the crowd cheering as I refused to relinquish it to the cops. How could I, in the city's twilight, surrounded by dyke voices calling out for justice, for freedom? For once, I was brave. I didn't let go and move on. I held tight to what I did. Sorry, I held tight to what I had. Even after the cops wrestled away with the last torch, we continued marching to Rockefeller Center, home to NBC, with plenty of other media outlets nearby. There, other Avengers had reassembled the shrine of Hattie Mae Cohen's and Brian Mock, the, and Marlene Colburn, with Mandela's high cheekbones and the same angry resolve, raised her bullhorn and condemned the anti-gay amendments in Colorado and Oregon, calling out the names of the dead queers and demanding attention to be paid as the anti-gay measures written on the flash paper went up in flames. That was the first time we stepped out as lesbians onto Fifth Avenue, the symbolic heart of the city, and the first time in decades lesbians owned the street. Lesbians owned the street. Something shifted in me. With the Avengers guarding my back, I was briefly, fearlessly myself. I was transformed. And those early actions, with their rituals, changing hate and fear into a kind of resolve, bound us together in ways I didn't understand until a long time after the group itself combusted. Okay, that's the end of chapter 4. I need to go to the washroom and then I'm going to keep reading. Because Lisa Michelle has a stream at 8, so I'm definitely going to end before then. But I feel like I might read for like another 2 hours or something if you guys are into it. Be right back. Sometimes I feel cold, and then I leave my bedroom where the heat is not turned on and come back, and I'm like, oh, it's so warm in my bedroom. We want Momo on demand. Where is Momo? Momo is camera shy. Oh, hello, Stefan. Um, she's Momo. What are you doing? Don't go there. Come here, Momo. Come. Mhm. Momo, look at the people. Can you hear the purring? Mhm. Okay. Stefan says, there was some pride event at a high school that I passed by with Stormy as a trans man on a poster. I wrote on it to redress history. So pissed. Fucking A. Like, yeah, I don't know. I feel that. I would love to like get a bunch of like stencils and spray paint or like stickers, but like stickers are not good because people can just like peel them off. Um, or something and like go to like these like gay community centers like in Montreal and Toronto and stuff and just like put up this kind of stuff like correct their misinformation. Um Gigi says we're wearing Karen down. She's like get a cat. Dragon Fox says Benji, I love your hair. I gotta say. Okay, well, thank you. Um Like, you see how brown the sides are? Can you tell it's brown? Like, it didn't go all the way to the roots. Like, I think either I'm going to dye it a very dark color or perhaps I will spend a lot of money and go to a hairstylist and be like, "Please fix this." Like a good hairstylist who knows, like a colorist, you know? Like who knows? Because like I like this is a disaster. It's like you can't see, but it's like a fucking there's purple and brown in the front. The sides are brown and the back is like green. Like it's from the bleach. Like it's a disaster. Okay. Anyway. Mama. Gigi says Benji, it looks like a lab labradorite stone. Interesting. Stefan says it's a fabulous disaster. I love it. Well, thank you. Um, okay. Anyway, Momo is gonna stay there and keep us company. Okay. I'll try not to cover her with the book. Is that okay? No, it's not like the color itself is not the problem. It's the bleach job that's the problem. Like, there's literally like purple and brown in the front. Like, you can't see it, but like, it's what the fuck is that? It's ridiculous. Okay. I think it suits you. Thank you. Okay. Um, read around Momo. Okay. Okay. Chapter 5. Cut the sides. No, but I'm trying to grow them out so I can have like one cohesive haircut instead of just always having shaved sides and long middle. Like I shouldn't have started bleaching them this time. I always bleached the top and not the sides. That's, like, I think what fucked me the most. If I had just done the middle, it would have been, like they look greenish, yeah, because they're not actually white. Like, if they had been white before I put the hair dye, then they would look blue. Because they're, like, this brownish, reddish color, when you added the hair dye, it now looks, like, bizarre. Anyway. Anyway. Okay. Just a few days later, just before Thanksgiving, the Avengers held a speaking out against violence over at the center. I'd never seen so many dykes in one place, especially African Americans and Latinas. It was like the subway cars from the Bronx and Brooklyn all got tipped out into the West Village. Everybody had stories to tell, mostly worse than mine. I was already gone from the house when I told my mother I was bi, so there was a limit the damage her rejection could do. I'd been harassed and insulted on the street, but never ended up in the hospital like some of these dykes, put there by random strangers, or worse, by their families who attacked them inside their homes. They had mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters who didn't just snicker or sneer or pray. They beat the holy crap out of their own flesh and blood, or raped them, or kicked them out into the streets when they were just kids, so they had to beg or turn to tricks. We were the experts in family values. The mic went from hand to hand to hand. The voices were raw, some hesitant, some self pitying and whiny, others pitiless and enraged, all as suicided by society as Van Gogh ever was. I can still hear their voices, maybe because we're still being attacked, no matter how many times we climb on the deck of that metaphorical destroyer and wave a giant banner, victory, no matter how many legal bones were tossed. Like, the author lives in France now. Hasn't there been, like, quite a lot of lesbophobic violence in France? It's just imagine her, like, in the 90s thinking, like, "Oh, it's gonna get better," and now what? Um, Face the camera. She's like, "What do you want from me?" Lol. Okay. That year, we had no illusions about what America thought. What we had were friends like us, and in the best queer traditions, we celebrated Thanksgiving with a gathering of the Homo clan in the Avenue B loft. Somebody brought a tofurkey sort of thing. Somebody else did potatoes, stuffing. Then there was cranberry sauce, assorted casseroles, curries, salads. The whole deal, except the bird, which even now I avoid in my return to meat eating. We joked about green beans, slimed with cream on mushroom soup, and opened a bottle after bottle of Beaujolais Nouveau, and put on loud music, and laughed and ate and drank all day. The only traditions we skipped were the red faced fights, bitter squabbling, broken crockery, and tears. We even gave thanks that we'd found our true families, queer ones, and that we weren't in Colorado where more and more lesbians and gay men were getting the shit kicked out of them even before Amendment 2 took effect. Georgina says, I think at a pride event in France last year, some TRAs, probably Tim's, tried setting fire to a group of lesbians. Yeah, that's what I remember. Yeah. hmm You can look it up. There's a YouTube video. Stefan knows. She says they're called Résistance Lesbienne. So if you spell it like in that French way, maybe, and like copy and paste that and put like Résistance Lesbienne attack into YouTube, you'll probably find it. Or maybe just like lesbian attack, pride. Pretty sure it was in 2021, right? That happened. Look, it was the recent one. Okay. Colorado queers fought back tooth and nail, filing lawsuits and organizing an economic boycott was mostly meant getting people to avoid Coors beer and cancel ski trips. That wasn't a problem for me since I didn't like Coors anyway and skiing wasn't at all on my agenda. In early December, the Avengers decided to be more provocative when we heard the Denver mayor was coming to New York on December 7th and 8th to promote tourism. There wasn't much time to plan. So the meeting just settled on a boring picket outside the Regency Hotel where the guy was having a power breakfast. I didn't see the point of standing there with a poster and shivering in the cold, so I didn't sign up to go. Apparently, the handful who turned up agreed. One Avenger just asked the obvious: "Why don't we go in?" A few moments later, 8 dykes burst into the hotel conference room, tossing leaflets to the journalists and chanting, "We're here, we're queer, we're not going skiing." Okay, I just want to say, I understand that this is like AIDS was very fresh in the consciousness and or ongoing, really, and all this stuff. But because we just finished reading this like lesbian separatist thing about how all men fuck over women, including gay men, it just feels like really depressing to me that they're simping so much for men. Like I understand that they think that like society hates homosexuals, which includes both gay men and lesbians, right? But really they should have just focused on lesbians. Like I would have preferred if they would like I'm not who am I to say what they should have done? But I would have preferred if they focused on lesbians entirely. Whatever. Okay. The mayor's mouth hung open in shock. There was an uproar. It was scary, fun, and it worked. Okay, but how can you know it was scary and fun if you weren't there? Okay. Tossstone says scary when you remember the burning times. What does that mean, the burning times? Okay. I should say up front that Wellington Webb wasn't a bad guy. He was Denver's first African American mayor and was actually pretty gay friendly himself, appalled at the amendment. But he'd come to plug Colorado tourism in the midst of a gay boycott and that made him a target. Small groups of Avengers followed him for the next 2 days, busting in on meetings and making their point, then getting out before security arrived. After the first day, a dyke from the mayor's own office, leaked the Avengers a copy of his schedule, and his pursuers would get to his appointments before him and goad bored reporters into grilling Webb about Amendment 2. He added more and more police protection, but intimidation didn't work. Neither did stealth. Once he sent his limo around to the entrance, while he took a cop car and tried to sneak into the back, but the Avengers figured it out and zapped him anyway. Okay, is she using zapped in terms of like taking an action specifically designed to get attention? Because that's what I said about um the first thing in the book. I was like, sounds like a zap. And I think that's how she's using it now. Oh, the witch burnings is what Tall Stones is talking about. Okay. I didn't know if you were referencing like gay people being burned alive in New Zealand or something. Okay. 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 We laughed our asses off when Avenger and journalist Anne Northrop came to the meeting and told us about it in her sardonic East Coast drawl. After he was a guest on a radio show and Avengers bombarded him with calls, he retired in defeat, canceling not just the rest of his New York trip, but his six-city extravaganza. And on day 21, the New York Times finally published an editorial. After declaring their sympathy for the liberal Mayor Webb and bemoaning how economic boycotts hurt everybody, they admitted it was necessary in this case, not just to change the law in Colorado, but to discourage other states from passing similar measures. Quote, the boycott is a legitimate weapon in a democratic society and historically one of the most effective. End quote. Quote. We passed the newspaper clipping around at the meeting, amazed at the power of a handful of big-mouthed dykes. The action wasn't as dramatic as fire eating, but it was effective and unexpected. We broke as many we broke as many taboos. Imagine intruding into that fancy hotel and screaming when the only sound you were hear was the clink of cutlery, the polite murmurs of power. Okay. A couple of weeks after targeting the teachers' union for their lukewarm support of the Rainbow curriculum, Avengers hit Self magazine on January 25th, 1993. We'd sent a letter asking them nicely to respect the Colorado boycott and skip their ski weekend in Aspen. When they didn't respond, we paid a house call, chanting awkwardly muted clatter over the muted clatter of fingers on keyboards, the ka-chinging of advertising dollars pouring in. That was enough for Alexandra Penny, the editor, to storm out of her office absolutely freaking. Why are you doing this to us? The New York Times thought it was hilarious. So did Newsday and the Daily News. Hell, everybody did, because Penny wasn't just any old editor, but the author of How to Make Love to a Man. Okay. And she'd been zapped by the Lesbian Avengers. Afterward, Self published their trip, proclaiming it had nothing to do with us. Nope, nothing at all. Oh, pulled their trip. Yeah. Hearing about the actions was almost enough to redeem the season of sanctimonious good cheer and endless focus on the family, no matter how dysfunctional. For Christmas, I'd been to Pennsylvania with Amy, tucking away my grandmother's 2 holiday cards. She'd peppered descriptions of dental work with complaints about my attitude. Quote, maybe you want to forget us, but we can't forget you. We love you. End quote. It set my teeth on edge, that little forgotten grain of truth. Yes, I'd once been loved, propped between my sisters on the couch for holiday photos, sprawled on my dad's big belly and listening to the beating of his sentimental heart. But what do you want from a mixed marriage? The poor Southern Baptist woman putting all her hopes on the genial Catholic bourgeois man. Enough ink's been spilled on the usual heterosexual misery. By the time I was 12, my bright, sensitive mother was lost to bitterness and hate. My oblivious father drifted further away. Everybody suffered, though it was good for a few horrible stories. The time my mom flipped out and threatened to run her car into a brick wall, and then denied it. That time in high school, after the divorce, when my dad dropped me off from his insurance and refused to pay up when I had to have a bone tumor chopped off. The doctor said it was benign after all. But a few months later, when he found a lump on his dog, nothing at all, said the vet. He still paid to have it removed, and proudly told me so at his derby party, tears welling up in his eyes. Her dad literally cares more about his dog than his daughter. Jesus Christ. Which is why I fled to the Parkers, even if it meant shivering in a cold colonial attic and being quoted at by Amy's 2 skinny little sisters and tiny beanpole brother who knew all of Monty Python and had, as a result, a particular fascination for the sex lives of mollusks. Short, round Amy looked like the mailman's kid next to them, though she could quote Monty Python too. Her mother interrupted her Christmas cookie baking mania just long enough to make a lemon meringue pie because she knew it was my favorite, which made me tear up because it was more than my own family did. During the Christmas Eve party, I drank gin and tonics in the kitchen with Amy's father, and I made him blush with extravagant curses this Scottish girl Melanie had taught me at the Halloween encampment. I guess I wanted to bust a hole in all the season's familiar pressure, expectations, and disappear into the ether. But her dad didn't freak out, just teased me back with jokes about some disgusting lentil burgers I'd made once when I was still Amy's significant other a couple of years ago. It sounds kind of sappy. It was. But it was nice to let my guard down a little, eat cookies, get drunk, rely, again, on the kindness of strangers. Okay, but were they strangers? I guess it would, yeah, okay, I guess the family was strangers, but wait, so she is now no longer dating Amy? Because when did she establish that she was dating Amy? In chapter 2, and this is chapter 5. Okay. Chapter 6. Maybe this will be the last chapter I read today. How many more chapters are there in this section? Like section 1. Maybe we can do all of section 1 today. We are halfway through section 1. If I stopped doing so much commentary, I think Benji's side hair looks like blue tiger eye myself. Interesting. Yeah. One day I'm gonna come and my whole head is gonna be buzzed and you're all gonna be like, where's your hair? Okay. Chapter 6. In February, somebody, possibly me, suggested a stink bombing campaign. Don't be sorry, Gigi. Okay. In February, somebody, possibly me, suggested a stink bombing campaign. Not everybody was thrilled. Fire eating may have been a circus trick, but it was really impressive, transformative even. But what kind of gravitas does stink bombs have? I didn't care. When it came to self image, I didn't need to spring from the head of the virgin huntress Athena like plenty of old time feminists. Give me Medusa or Loki any day. The merry pranksters, the glorious Dadaists, or the irreverent Van Dykes with sex workshops and t shirts sporting a gun toting Patty Hearst. In no time, the working group came up with the perfect slogan: Homophobia stinks, identified plenty of smelly targets, and we were off. I paired up with Melanie Fallon, the curly headed Bernard student with a slight Scottish accent and the gawky elegance of a colt. She was the one I'd met at the Halloween encampment who had shared her foul mouthed mother's creative curses. Her father was a scientist. Okay, I feel like she's ramping up to say that she hooked up with this woman or became like girlfriends with this woman or something. Georgina says dumb question, but what is a moid? I see it online all the time. I'm assuming it's a low male, it's a low value male. So incels and men's rights activists call females femoids because they like literally don't see us as people and they're acknowledging that they're like explicitly saying, yeah, we don't see you as people. Like um yeah, I don't know. You can look up like Google femoid versus moid, but basically it's like feminists like pushing it back on them and being like, we don't see you as full people kind of thing. It's just like a derogatory way to refer to all men. It just means like men. Yeah. Okay. Gigi says thank you, saving my typing. Hey, you're welcome, Georgina. Yeah, I would just like look up what like the definition of femoid, and moid is like the inverse of that. Okay. Yeah, I feel like we're working up to them dating because why is she telling us so much about this person? She hasn't told us this much about many other women. Um, her father was a scientist. Her younger sister very American. Our target was St. Patrick's Cathedral, the epicenter of anti-gay activism in New York. ACT UP had made their own stink that year or two before, invading a mass at the drippy neo-Gothic building to protest how the Catholic Church spread HIV with their campaigns against condoms and queers. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Fucking shit. Yeah. Um when Melanie and I got uptown on February 12th, 1993, there were tourists everywhere and plenty of security guards. I was sweating and nervous. Sure, I had a sign indicating troublemaking dyke on my back. We whispered in the corner, giggled, and tried to think it through. The committee had mostly considered the metaphorical aspects, not the practical ones. The space was too enormous for a little stench to penetrate. We needed a crew of 20 and a crate of stink. We decided to go ahead anyway. I dropped a couple of glass vials on the floor, but when I stepped on them with my tennis shoes, they wouldn't break. Melanie finally crushed them with her big Doc Marten boots. But in the big cathedral, the vials barely had the impact of a fart. We slapped stickers on the back of a pew and left. Another Avenger cell had more impact in their attacks on the rancid Jack Hale. He was a lawyer for the Archdiocese of New York, and they loaned him out to whatever bigot needed him next, like the anti-gay granny Mary Cummings, or the ancient orders of the Hibernians, which was responsible for banning Ilgo from the upcoming St. Patty's Day parade, the International Irish Lesbian and Gay Association or something like that. Oh, hey, gay. Okay. Okay. The plan was to break a huge amount of stink bombs in the elevator of his office building and put a sticker on the inside doors. People would get in, notice the stench, and see the sticker when the doors closed. It went better than anybody dreamed because when Mr. Hale went on TV that night to slam Irish queers, he was stupid enough to complain at length about the stink bombing, holding up the sticker the whole time, just as if we had paid him to do it. So, thanks to Mr. Hale, all of New York got to see the Lesbian Avengers logo and read our message: Homophobia stinks. We barely had time to celebrate before we were on to the next actions, focusing on St. Valentine's Day. It was tempting to massacre a few assholes, but what we did on the 13th was take a train out to a neighborhood in Queens armed with lyrics for a serenade. It was snowy, dark, and cold. There weren't many streetlights among the row houses, just the yellow squares from windows. So after ringing the doorbell of a white-haired homophobe, Mary Cummings, we could barely see our lines to sing, "Cupid, get out your bow, la la la, shooby doo ah." It was enough. A hook-nosed Irishman charged out, bellowing, "Why the hell don't you go home? You're disturbing the peace." His voice shook with anger and fear, though the only real affront was the key we tried to sing it. So they couldn't sing, is what she's saying. Still, I can imagine what he and Mary thought in their dirty minds. Quote, "First those lezzies turn up at a grade school and now at our own door, singing," end quote. Which was somehow more offensive and terrifying than anything I could have dreamed up, like egging their house or setting bags of burning shit on their doorstep that they'd have to stamp out. On St. Valentine's Day itself, more mittened Avengers made their way to the New York Public Library in Midtown, where enormous stone lions stand guard over the rare books and researchers housed inside. The Avengers were more interested in the snowy Bryant Park in back, where there is a statue of Gertrude Stein. I don't remember when I first heard of her. In art history, I think. When they flashed the portrait Picasso did, where she was more bolder than a woman. The professor didn't say much about her, just repeated the legend that when someone told Picasso that Stein did not look like her portrait, he replied, "She will." And she did. Later on, when I found out that she was a dyke and a writer, and I was too, I carried around the postcard of her from Alice B. Toklas. I didn't read anything by Stein until that year between college and New York when I was living in Cincinnati writing poems and going and doing rogue performances. Like having a handful of women stand up to crunch apples in the midst of an audience expecting poems. It was around then that I gobbled down so much of the making of Americans, I almost made myself sick. The rhythm got in my head, repeating Americans endlessly repeating themselves, and I couldn't sleep for weeks. What audacity, grappling with what an entire country was, what humans are. At the same time, she was upending the novel, turning words into hallucinogens. It couldn't have been easy keeping at it. Her own brother scoffed. Nobody published her work for years, and when they did, most critics sneered. Not because her writing was experimental, but because she was a big dyke and didn't hide it. The Avenger goal outside the library was to reunite the statue of Gertrude Stein with her lover, Alice, and, as Maxine Wolfe put it into her opening words, to celebrate the connections between dyke love, dyke art, dyke activism. He looked pretty good, that Alice statue. The committee had been working on it for ages, besides rehearsing the Thespian Avengers version of Stein's poem, quote unquote, Lifting Belly. The bill also boasted experimenting dykes like our own Sarah Schulman and a ton of others like Yvonne Rainer and Eileen Miles, whom I'd met during those few months that kept company with the dancer Jennifer Monson. I think we got together over mason jars of kerosene and bits of old sheets during the first fire eating session. We played on the swings at Tompkins Square Park and traipsed out to see the ducks in Jamaica Bay. It wasn't just how they floated and flew, but the invisible path they traced in migration, a kind of globe-trotting dance. Jennifer lived in Williamsburg, which was still full of abandoned buildings, and we'd go to explore, sliding under ribbons of yellow warning tape. Lights streamed through broken roofs, holes gaped in the floor. She'd grab me by the hand and pull me forward past the dirty needles and condoms until we could barely see. If we had to, we could almost navigate by the burnt sugar stink of the domino factory a few blocks away. Her apartment was a loft bed in the dance studio she and her roommate Didi Dorvilliers built in the old mozza factory on Bedford Avenue. If I was still there when rehearsals started in the morning, I'd join in warm ups when all the dancers started squirming across the floor or throwing themselves around on it. Sometimes I'd stay to watch them collide as hard as they could in the air, waltz upside down on their hands, try on the furry legs of fawns instead of tutus and tights, and disrupting, if you will, the time space gender continuum I'd always accepted as dance. Once I went with her and her posse of dancers to the foot of the bridge. It was night. We began climbing. I only made it a little way, but they kept inching their way up, from the one handhold to the next. Jennifer went furthest. She always did, hanging on like she hadn't forgotten her evolutionary roots and had that much more connection to the starry, threatening sky. It was around then we took a workshop with her friend Eileen Miles, this amazing dyke poet who wasn't exactly what you'd called an activist, but in '92 had campaigned as a write-in candidate for president, claiming America in her own way, like Warnowitz had and the Avengers were beginning to. The class was in the loft somewhere farther east in the East Village. I remember one girl who had tattoos and piercings, or should have, and played in a band. And Eileen would hand out Xeroxes of John Ashbery or whoever she was into that day, and we'd read our own poems. She didn't mind it when I handed over sonnets. Yeah, sonnets. All typed out, the rhymes doing their best to nail together my own uncontrollable life. She was one of the first dyke poets to write about her own, and dared leave her life so messy and raw only the poetry itself redeemed it. Uta says, will it ever be possible to convince young lesbians to avoid association with Tims, even if Ls have dysphoria because the Tims are the patriarchs on steroids? The patriarchy on steroids? I don't know. The reason that like the LGBT or queer community has gotten this way is because they guilt women and play on their sympathies, and women are programmed with female socialization, right? So even though it's like mostly geared towards like heterosexuality, it can be used in any way. And like Tims are heterosexual anyway, most of them. Like I don't know. Like within the patriarchy they have power, and I think they're very good at using that power to manipulate lesbians. So I think though that a lot more lesbians have peaked. Like I've been around like rad femme spaces for like 7 years or something. And yeah, 7 years. Almost. No wait. I'm 25. 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 years. Um and you notice there's way more peaked lesbians now than there was like back then. So I think it just has to do with how many of them keep buying into the propaganda and don't see behind the curtain, and how many do see that. Phil says you can just deprogram. What do you mean just? As if it's some easy thing to do. And how are we supposed to do that? Like the queer activism stuff is fucking everywhere. Every school, every doctor's office, every government institution is all with this queer bullshit. Like deprogramming, if you wanted to do it on like a big enough scale to like actually fight the queer theory, would need to be like just as big of a like media strategy, you know? Anyway, Phil, I would like to think this. Once exposed to common sense, reasonable ones will catch on. But like, I don't think so. It's like, there are women who become like feminists. A lot of women become feminists when they're teenagers or in their early 20s, right? And then later on, they like settle down and get married and have kids and like completely have nothing to do with feminism at all anymore. And it's like, did they stop understanding their position in patriarchy? No. They just realized it was easier to go along to get along. Like, I know a couple of, well, I don't really know them very well, but I'm acquainted with a couple of like trans masculine dykes or whatever, or like genderqueer dykes or whatever. And in the last couple of months, I followed like a couple of them who were like getting into radical feminism and saying they're radical feminists and whatever. And then now that COVID is kind of over, a couple of them have been like, well, like I got into it. Um, like I got into radical feminism and like it's interesting like theoretically, but like this is who I am. Like I'm trans and this is the way I'm going to like live authentically or whatever bullshit. So it's like I think a lot of women when exposed to the truth, they can't accept it because it's easier to go along to get along. The thing that stops you from going along to get along is when you actually like have a friend who's been raped by a Tim and you're like, "Oh fuck." Like it needs to actually be like it needs to reach the point where it's actually easier to rebel than it is to go along. At least that's what you don't know what genderqueer dyke means. It means nothing. It means nothing. It means a dyke who may be androgynous or masculine or may not be. In this case, they are the ones that I'm talking about. They're all like very visibly butch, which is like the entire fucking thing. Like these dykes that I'm talking about, they are visibly butch, and they're like, I have to like express my trans masculine whatever, and I'm like, so you're saying you need an identity to be masculine? So you don't actually believe that women can be masculine, or you do believe that, but you don't apply it to yourself because you have zero self respect. Like anyway, but anyway, all of this to say, even once you've been enlightened, you look at the two paths following along the cult, rebelling against the cult. In that moment, which one is the path of least resistance? That is what a lot of people end up doing. They go with the path of least resistance. So, when you switch to the path of like rebelling against the queer cult, it's probably because whatever the fuck was happening to you in the queer community gotten like so bad that it was easier to be outside that, which like we know what it's like to be outside that, right? So it has to get pretty fucking bad inside for you to leave. Um, Gay says we have to get rid of affirmation only statutes. Yeah, I totally agree. Um, anyway, that's my general understanding of the situation. If we have more publicity, like the BBC article about the cotton ceiling, I think that'll make a big difference. And like more lesbian organizing, like we need more lesbian grassroots groups. I think if there was lesbian grassroots groups, it might feel like even if the path of least resistance is like the queer community, like if you leave, there is some kind of support for you, like a real world in-person support. Like she's talking about this like we found our families thing. Like you have to think about it from the lesbian's perspective. If she thinks that these queer people are like her real family, right? Like the what has to happen for her to decide to leave must be like really really bad, or she must have found a better alternative than this queer family she has. You know what I mean? Anyway, okay. Thanks for dropping in, Uta. I'm very concerned about the young lesbians. Very, very concerned. Extremely fucking concerned. Stefan says in Switzerland they just put out a sex ed brochure for 12-year-olds and up. No mention of lesbians, one mention of gay, 28 mentions of transitions, 5 mentions of dick clit. Ugh. Why? Why? Stefan, have you tweeted about this or written about this? Like, where can we find out more about this? I would love to talk about this brochure maybe on a live stream if it's in French. I assume it's in like 3 languages or something if it's in Switzerland. Okay. I'm gonna keep reading. Thank you for bringing that up, Stefan. I really want to read that book that's like that like lesbian sex ed book where there's like an entire chapter that's on like how to have sex with a Tim and like, eviscerate it, obviously. But I don't know if Phil says I do think reasonable ones will catch on when they're exposed to common sense. But like how many women, are in like let's think about others like groups that can be compared to the queer community, like anarchist communities, for example. So many women I know who have left anarchist communities where like there was like overt domestic violence like all the time. There was like sexual assault and abuse all the time. And all of these women were like so dedicated to the cause that they were able to like trick themselves into not caring that much about it or like overlooking it or thinking like, oh, that won't happen to me, it happens to the other women or something like that. And it's like, why? Why did they stay? Because they were stupid? No. Like, I don't know. Like, think about, you know, when a girl goes to her mom and says, like, so, like, my uncle raped me or something. And the mom was like, no, no, no. He would never do that. He's a nice guy. Like, if they're in the cult and they believe that Tims are nice guys, they're going to keep being that person who makes excuses for them and can't see that. Like, do you think when the moms say that to their daughters, they understand that this is actually what's happening to their daughter and they're okay with it? Like, probably sometimes. But I think most of the time they're in denial. And I think it's like if you are a lesbian and you think the only like this is like your community, like this is the only people you have, I think that it would be really easy to feed your denial because it's like this is all I have. I need to make it work somehow. I need to manage the situation so that it's like survivable for me because this is all I have. I don't know. Yeah. Matt Adams says I've thought a lot lately about how inherently transphobic the trans movement is, especially when I saw a stream talking about Tim Tims think they are better lesbians than lesbians. Of course they do. Because everything is about the dick. Like, I mean that in a very literal sense. Society is based upon dick. It's phallocentric. So anybody with a dick is better at anything than anybody without a dick. So obviously, other men will be like, yeah, of course, this man with a dick is better at doing this thing, which is like exclusively female than an actual female would be. Alright. Okay. Which also better lesbians. Like, I don't know. Just when you say that, I immediately think of sex, and I'm like, I don't think that they're very good at sex. Like, do you see what they say about like what they think about sex, their attitudes about it and stuff? Like, it must be pretty like depersonalizing to have sex with these like fanatical, fantastical, porn sick men. Okay. Anyway, okay. It was around then we took a workshop with her friend Eileen Miles, this amazing dyke poet who wasn't exactly what you'd call an activist. Wait, I read this, didn't I? She was one of the first dyke poets to write about her own, and dare leave her life so messy and raw only the poetry itself redeemed it. Later on, I read with her a few times, including at Mona's on Avenue B, way up near 14th Street. I always liked hearing Eileen read. She didn't get too sing-songy or pretend to be incanting anything. She just set her jaw and got going, letting all the sounds of working-class Boston spill out. That afternoon, the crowd was stuffed with Avengers, and the words were working for me, too. Every poem lodging in the audience like pleasant little hooks that bound us briefly together. It was the same feeling I got running around with fire, even when every other voice amplifies. Or sorry. It was the same feeling I got running around with fire, when every other voice amplifies yours. Every body delivers the message you exist. I don't know what Jennifer thought of me. I was kind of a mess, writing about being broke and sick, pressing this burning body against hers that could do backflips. We never were good at communicating. She was a dancer, I was a writer. And writers aren't the best with words when they don't have a blank page in front of them and time to revise. More than once, Jennifer bit me in the throes of some emotion that may have been passion, maybe not. Sometimes I suspected she was Maynard, considering the best way to rip me limb from limb to get the poetry out. I gave consent to be devoured. We all did. She persuaded a couple dozen Avengers to be in a dance at PS 122, so Public School 122. Matt Adams says, "What, you aren't into strapless strap-ons?" Ugh, I felt gross just writing that. Have you heard biostrap? Like that is the cringiest term of all time. Okay. When it was time, we ran from the audience to the stage, threw ourselves on the floor, pounded and screamed, then left after the tantrum. She also tucked away that image of a small group of burning figures surrounded by the rising buildings on Fifth Avenue. It echoes through her work even now. Filmmaker Sue Friedrich saw the Avengers in front of the elementary school wearing I Was a Lesbian Child t shirts and was seized by the idea for hide and seek, part documentary, part fiction. Sue Schaffner and Carrie Moyer, who designed so many of our flyers, took Avengers for their Dyke Action Machine posters, posing us as American Gothic, as spoofs of Benetton ads. Sarah Schulman inserted us in her book, My American History, and haunted by the burning deaths of Hattie McCohen and Brian Mock, Annie Semo wrote The Table of Liquid Measures. Maybe it was a continual summer after all. This incredible fecundity. Rage and joy ripened on the vine, no matter what the season, and Gertrude Stein was the mother of us. When her snowy statue was united with Alice and the last poem read, somebody cranked up a boombox, and the Avengers danced their own experimental versions of foxtrots and tangos, first upright, then horizontal, rolling around like puppies, like pigeons in the snowy grass. A couple days later, Lower Manhattan shook with an enormous explosion of sirens went off all over the city. There'd been a bombing downtown at the World Trade Center. 6 dead, 1,000 injured. More than one preacher blamed queers for it, as if all we had to do was exist with our lesbian bodies and lesbian voices and lesbian jeans and lesbian coats for the inhabitants of Jericho to shake with terror and the walls of Jericho to fall. Okay, this is how much we've read. This is how much more there is left in section 1. I'm kind of tired. I 1000% need to order food right now. What should I order? Maybe a really fancy poutine. I deserve that, don't I? If you have a Thai place near you, pineapple fried rice, it's amazing. I haven't had Thai pineapple fried rice in like, well, it's almost a year since my breakup, and that was like with my girlfriend. So when was that? It's been like almost 2 years since I had Thai food, man. Honestly, I'm not a huge Thai food person. Um, oh, dragon. Oh, sorry, bye, dragon. Now I want Thai food. Okay, let's order food, and then maybe I'll read one more chapter. Here it is. I've reorganized all the apps on my phone. Actually, you know what? I should just end the stream. Been streaming for 2.5 hours. Yeah, it's midnight in Europe. Night, Stefan. Yeah. So tomorrow I have a thing that I'm definitely doing in the afternoon. I have a thing I may be doing in the nighttime. So I might stream in the morning, but also I'm supposed to like, like I need to go shopping and run errands and crap. I need to get Momo cat food, for example. Um, but definitely Sunday we are going to be well, we have a Benji soapbox on Sunday. Um yeah. Yes, thank you Aqua for the amazing art and for the amazing lesbian newspapers. Um yeah. VF is like, you're not allowed a life, Benji. We need more Momo. Momo, come say goodbye. Come. Oh yeah, Eleanor, I had COVID. Sleep as much as you can. It's like fucking exhausting having COVID. Momo, purr for the people. Purr. Momo, they think you're beautiful. Does she care? No. Oh, your son turned 16, Toss Stones? That's cool. Or can you actually have a party with like the lockdown stuff in New Zealand or not really? Oh, and Eleanor, it's your daughter's 20th birthday today. That's amazing. What's the chances? This is really unusual for Momo. Like she never sits in my arms, and she doesn't usually purr when I'm holding her. Or if she does, it's like for a minute and then she runs away. She's like totally chilled out. It's because of the sisterhood. It's because you guys are here. I should make my channel just like an ASMR of Momo purring forever. Okay. She's done purring, so I think that means the stream is over. Oh no, she started purring again. I still think the stream is over though. Are you okay? You good? Okay. So, I will see all of you. Well, I assume, because you're my watchers. I will see all of you on Sunday at noon Eastern Standard Time, which is 9 a.m. Pacific Time, which is 5 p.m. London time. You gotta check this bit out, Benji. She's making the sweetest faces. Well, yeah, probably I'll rewatch that. I actually go back and listen to the Momo purrings parts of the videos. Okay. Please do not call my fans Bengines. We cannot have Ben in any part of the name. Yeah, and I'm going to schedule the next reading of this, and then you can please go to my channel and do the set reminder thing, because I think I'm deboosted from YouTube and you won't get any notifications otherwise. Okay. Have a good night, guys. See you. Have a great weekend. Bye.